There was a time before smartphones and laptops. The rhythm of writing was set by the steady clacking of typewriter keys. But in a small New England town, one of the last sanctuaries for these vintage machines is about to fall silent. After decades of repairing, restoring, and reviving the written word, the shop's owner was retiring, bringing an end to an era. These typewriter aficionados gathered for one final type-in to say a final goodbye to their beloved typewriter repair store, but more importantly, its proprietor. Welcome to That's Life, I swear. This podcast is about life's happenings in this world that conjure up such words as intriguing, frightening, life-changing, inspiring, and more. I'm Rick Barron, your host. That said, here's the rest of this story. The history of typewriters is rich and fascinating. While early inventors experimented with mechanical writing devices for centuries, these early prototypes failed to gain widespread use. Well, that changed in 1868 with the introduction of the Scholes and Glidden typewriter, the first machine to bear the name typewriter. Developed by four Milwaukee-based inventors, including Christopher Latham Scholes, it also gave rise to the QWERTY keyboard, an innovation that continues to shape modern typing, even on computers today. By the early 20th century, typewriters had become indispensable. Millions were sold in the first half of the 1900s, and their popularity persisted well into the 1980s. Typewriters maintained a devoted following in certain circles in the digital age. Yet as technology advanced, both typewriters and the shops that specialize in repairing them have grown increasingly rare. Suddenly, typewriters had a new home, the dumpsters. And that's where our story begins. The Saturday afternoon light filtered softly through the Edith M. Fox Library windows, casting long shadows across the worn-out wooden tables where typewriters stood like silent sentinels of a bygone era. Tom Ferriel's withered hands trembled ever so slightly as he surveyed the crowd. He saw a mosaic of generations united by the rhythmic percussion of keys and the metallic whisper of memory. For decades, Tom had been more than just a repairman. He was a keeper of lost stories, a guardian of a fading craft. But now at 69, he was stepping away, closing the doors at the Cambridge Typewriter Company, the area's last typewriter shop of its kind. Retirement wasn't just an ending, he realized. It was a farewell to a world that had slowly dissolved around him, like ink bleeding into an old page. Tom had an unexpected journey that began in 1980. A childhood friend and next-door neighbor mentioned that his father needed someone to learn the dying art of typewriter repair. At the time, Tom was working for a tree trimming company. Now, as luck would have it, Tom was a natural tinkerer, and he took the job, never suspecting that he would spend the next 4 decades bringing old machines and the words they carried back to life. In those early years, his work was steady. Offices still hummed with typewriters, and his shop thrived. Tom would say, these typewriters get sticky and they get dirty, his voice carrying the tenderness of a caretaker. But with a little love, they spring back to life. Those words echoed his resilience throughout his career, surviving the digital tsunami that had swept away most of his contemporaries. When the digital age arrived, typewriters became relics, discarded without a second thought. His business nearly vanished, but Tom kept fixing what he could, often for little or no pay at all. And then, just as suddenly as they had disappeared, typewriters found their way back, this time in the hands of young writers, artists, and dreamers searching for something tangible in an era of computer screens. What was once old was new again. Standing before 130 odd typewriter fans who turned up for his retirement party at the Edith M. Fox Library up the street from his shop in Arlington, Massachusetts, Tom relayed the rules for the contest. Participants will have but 5 minutes to type, as accurately as possible, some pages from David McCullough's book, 1776. And it was at that moment a thunderous sound of typewriter keys filled the room. At the farewell gathering, typewriters of all shapes and sizes sat on folding tables, filling the room with their distinctive chatter. There were people like Don Worwell, who flew in from Iowa with his 1939 Corona Zephyr, and Abigail Gifkin, an 18-year-old poet who remembers the first time she stepped into Tom's shop as a child. You know, he changed my life, adding that she hopes to continue writing with as much love and excellence as Tom put into his craft of repairing typewriters. James Brookman, 46, who works at Harvard as a distance learning coordinator, had found that using his typewriter, a Smith Corona Coronet Electric that he found on the street about 20 years ago, is a much-needed palate cleanser for someone who spends his days using technology. Mr. Brockman makes typewriter art at the party. He put the final touches on a portrait of Weird Al Yankovic and is a member of the Boston Typewriter Orchestra. James said that Tom is a very beloved friend of the band. Tom's daughter Emma stood nearby, her hand resting gently on his shoulder. His wife Anne-Marie's eyes glistened with pride. They understood that this wasn't just a retirement party. It was a commemoration of a dying art. During the evening, Tom's memory took him into the past, as he recalled the many visits he had with so many customers. Every day, another customer clutching an old typewriter would walk into Tom's shop. He would carefully look at the machine over. Invariably, it was a total mess. Some of these typewriters were manufactured decades ago. The heavy metal bristling with moving parts were sometimes laced with years of grime. The keys were too stiff. Or maybe the paper that was supposed to just glide through kept getting stuck. Then Tom would hear the infamous question from the customer. "Do you think you can get it going again?" with a touch of anxiety in their voice. Tom, who had been repairing typewriters for over 4 decades, would say he'd give it his best shot. When they came in and picked up the typewriter, they saw the magic that he did, and just seeing their smile was everything to us, Tom said. Even celebrated author Susanna Kaysen, who wrote Girl Interrupted, had stopped by earlier in the week to say goodbye. With a hint of worry, she hugged Tom and then asked, "Who's going to fix my typewriter now?" Tom handed her his number, an unspoken promise that even in retirement, he wouldn't abandon the machines or the people who loved them. As the event drew to a close, Tom took the microphone for a brief speech. He looked out at the faces of friends and strangers who had become a kind of family, and for a moment, the weight of it all, the end of an era, the closing of a chapter, hung in the air. "I hope another shop opens soon," he said. As Tom uttered those words, he knew the hard truth. Shops like his just don't open. They are born from devotion, from a love of craftsmanship and history. As Tom stepped away from the stage, the reality of his absence settled in with those in attendance. "He has blessed so many people," someone said. "I feel like we're going to be all alone in the woods." The last sound of the typewriter keys clattered. The final page had been typed. And just like that, a small but cherished piece of history was ending. As the contest ended and people were leaving with warm hugs and goodbyes to Tom, he felt disappointed that this beautiful journey was ending. Tom hated to close the shop, but he knew it was time. As Tom closed the front door to his shop, he heard the doorbell chime ring one last time. In the distance, he heard someone from the group say, "Thank you, Tom. You're the best." And the crowd cheered. So what can we learn from this story? What's the takeaway? On the day of Tom's farewell party, surrounded by friends, family, and enthusiasts traveling from across the country, he felt the weight of his legacy. Each typewriter in the room was more than a machine. They were vessels of human expression, a bridge between generations. He knows that when his friends type the keys on their typewriters, They will remember the person who poured love into keeping this beautiful art form alive for those who wish to keep it alive. Well, there you go, my friends. That's life, I swear. For further information regarding the material covered in this episode, I invite you to visit my website, which you can find on Apple Podcasts for show notes and the episode transcript. As always, I thank you for the privilege of you listening and your interest. Be sure to subscribe here or wherever you get your podcasts so you don't miss an episode. And we'll see you soon.